Rule 12. Analogies require relevant, similar examples. From a Workbook for Arguments by Morrow and Weston. Arguments by analogy do not require that the example used as an analogy be exactly like the example in the conclusion. Our bodies are not exactly like cars, after all. We're flesh and bone, not metal. We don't have wheels or seats or windshield wipers and so on. And analogies do require relevant similarities. What cars are made of, or exactly what their parts are, is irrelevant to the doctor's point. The argument is about the upkeep of complex systems. One relevant difference between our bodies and our cars is that our bodies do not need regular service in exactly the same way that cars do. Cars regularly need oil changes, new pumps or transmissions, and similar things like this. But replacing body parts or fluids, it's much rarer, so we can think of organ transplants or blood transfusions. On the other hand, it's true that we need regular checkups. Otherwise, problems can develop undetected. In addition, older and strenuously used bodies, like older and higher mileage cars, may need checkups more often. So, the doctor's analogy is partly successful. The service part is somewhat weak in our view, but the checkup part is persuasive. Likewise, 20th century Italy is not just like 15th century America. Italy is known to every 20th century schoolchild, whereas America was unknown to much of the world in the 15th century. Nordwell was not an explorer, and a commercial jet is not the Santa Maria. But these differences are not relevant to Nordwell's analogy. Nordwell simply means to remind us that it's senseless to claim a country already inhabited by its own people. Whether that land is known to the world's schoolchildren or how the discoverer arrived there is not important. The more appropriate reaction might have been to try to establish diplomatic relations as we would try to do today if somehow the land and people of Italy had just been discovered. That's Nordwell's point, and taken in that way, his analogy makes a good and unsettling argument. One famous argument uses an analogy to try to establish the existence of a creator of the world. This argument begins that, in the same way we can infer the existence of an architect or carpenter when we see a beautiful and well-built house, we can also infer the existence of a creator from the order and beauty of the world. If we spell this out in premise-conclusion form, it might look something like this, and we call it the argument from design. Beautiful and well-built houses must have makers, designers, and builders, the first premise. The second premise, the world is like a beautiful and well-built house, so therefore, the world also must have a maker, a designer, and a builder, and in this case, that builder is God. And I'll just add here that if you're interested in this kind of thing, I cover the argument from design in my Philosophy 101 class that will be offered online next quarter. So certainly, if you like proofs for the existence of God, feel free to sign up for that class. Now, back to this analogy. Notice that more examples are not necessarily needed to make this analogy work. The argument turns on the similarity of the world to one well-understood example, in this case, a house. Whether the world really is relevantly similar to a house, though, is not so clear. We know quite a bit about the causes of houses, but houses are part of the world. We know very little, actually, about the structure of the world or the universe as a whole, or about what sorts of causes it might be expected to have. The philosopher David Hume discussed this argument in his dialogue concerning natural religion, when he asked, "Is part of nature a rule for the whole? Think of how wide a step you have taken when you compared houses to the universe, and from their similarity in some circumstances inferred a similarity in their causes. Does not the great disproportion bar all comparison and indifference. Hume is trying to suggest that the universe is not relevantly similar to a house here. Houses indeed imply makers beyond themselves. However, for all we know, the universe as a whole may contain its cause within itself, or perhaps has some kind of cause unique to universes. This analogy, then, makes a poor argument. Some other kinds of argument is probably needed if the existence of God is to be inferred from the nature of the world. And again, if you're interested in this type of argument, I would encourage you to take my Philosophy 101 class in the spring.